Okay, guys, we're back now with the final two categories, Ron Paul and the future. Bix, you and I have spoken. If anybody watched the previous part about Ron Paul, Rand Paul, and that entire debacle, we both feel differently about this. I feel betrayed by Rand Paul. I know you're in the camp that believes this is all going according to plan. Just real quick, where do you stand right now on Ron Paul, Rand Paul? Is Ron Paul going to be the guy, or is it's Romney, right? I just don't see any other two ways about it. It's Romney or Obama.
It is going to be Ron Paul versus Obama, and Romney literally will get thrown out with the bathwater when the monetary crash happens, and that's pending. We're looking at weeks max because of what's going on in Europe right now. So be prepared for it. Everything's going to change real quick.
Yeah, and I should say too before we move on, because Bix, how incredible events are across the planet right now. In Europe, we're seeing people in Italy, with BNI Bank, not have access to their money for the entire month. They can't get any of their money out of their accounts. They can't do their payroll. They can't pay their mortgage. They can't get any money with these bank holidays now that we're seeing around the planet. And so people need to understand that this thing could happen in this country overnight. We could see similar things start to happen.
That's exactly right. And my contacts in Europe are saying there is no plan to transition out of the euro. Nobody has a plan. Not the central bankers, not the private sector. Nobody has a plan.
I believe that too, because I just watched the BBC movie, which anybody can pull up on YouTube and watch for free. It's an hour long. It's called The Last Days of Lehman. And boy, is that an eye-opener, Bix. I mean, these guys literally had no plan in 2008 over that weekend when they were trying to figure out how to save Lehman or let it go under. And I mean, what a debacle. And basically they were all sitting around the table at the Fed basically saying, this is the end of the Western banking system as we know it. It could all happen on Monday morning. I mean, that's how close, everything was to the brink. And as you and I both know, nothing's been fixed, has it?
Nope. And the plan is to get the banks to that very same point this summer, and the people are ready to stand up and say, no, we're not going to bail you out. We're going to pull the plug.
All right, guys. Well, here we go now. These are Bix's answers as recorded 2 weeks ago about Ron Paul, and then the final category, the future. All right, Bix, the first question comes from Angel. Do you still think Sarah Palin will indeed back Ron Paul?
Yes, definitely. She still has endorsed Romney, and nobody thought Ron Paul would get this far except me.
Joni S. wants to know, a Facebook friend posted that Ron Paul has ties to the baddest guy, George Soros. At the time of this post, I had read or heard that the bankster elite cabal would do anything to keep the good guys from getting the party nomination, meaning the GOP. She's wondering, this appears to be the case with this alleged connection between Ron Paul and Soros. We don't talk about hearsay on Facebook, but is Ron Paul a good guy or a bad guy?
He is absolutely a good guy, and they try to connect him with Romney too, and all. Romney's a bad guy. He's connected with the Alan Soros or Alan Stanford Ponzi scheme. They'll take him out when the time is right, but all the. If it's not Ron Paul, then we're pretty much screwed because there's no one better than Ron Paul.
All right, this one comes from Josh. It seems a big part of your predictions about the U.S. returning to gold standard revolves around the 2012 election and Ron Paul getting elected. What if Ron Paul isn't elected?
No, my theory does not revolve around that. That's part of the choices that people are going to be given after the crash. They wanted Ron Paul in a position. It's up to the people. Like Chris Duane says that no one's coming to save us, and I believe him. He's correct. They're not coming to save us. They're going to take the bad guys out and have us decide for ourselves how we want to live our future. And if Ron Paul is one of the choices by the time the crash happens, then I think the majority of Americans will say, yeah, he was right all along.
This one comes from Farrell. He says, I've read theories that JFK was shot because he was going to end the Federal Reserve. Doesn't that put Ron Paul in great danger?
Yes, especially when he gets more and more popular. The word I got from one of my subscribers, and I don't know if this is true or not, but the word I got was that the word went out to the bad guys when the good guys kind of took over a few years back. Word went out to the bad guys that Ron Paul is untouchable, and nobody should even think about pulling anything where they take him out. Now, that was a subscriber said he knew someone within the letter alphabet, CIA, NSA, whatever it was, that word went out to everybody that he is untouchable. So hopefully that's the case. And I think it might be the case because he is, he's speaking to everybody, he's shaking everybody's hand. So, keep our fingers crossed. If they take him out, it won't stop the revolution. It'll probably only get stronger.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the future here, and Steve D wants to know. Here goes. BIX, do you think that the original initial route plan put into place by the good guys has been worth all the pain, misery, war, and death it has caused in the world since its inception?
It is a great question, and it is something that I have thought about and struggled with. And unfortunately, we won't know what would have happened had this plan not gone into implementation in the early 70s. Our government was being taken over after Kennedy was assassinated, and this was a way to kind of take the bankers out and at the same time grow our infrastructure, become more prosperous, things like that. Yes, there has been horrific things caused in the meantime, probably because of it. 9/11 is the number one example, and 9/11 is referenced in the comics that came out of the Fed. Ruta writes it in the sand in the new comic. If you haven't looked at it, get the comic, open it up, or look at it online and look at the difference between the two things she writes in the sand. 9/11 is in the release of 2007, and the reality is we have what we have. They did it. They implemented the plan. People have died because of it. But how many people would have died if back in the 1960s, Kennedy came out and said, there are evil people running our government. We need to take them out now. He kind of did. He told the press corps that, there are people working against him. There would have been a revolution. People aren't smart in the United States, especially back then, about the things that go on in the shadows. So it's been a long road. It's been dangerous. It's been deadly. But you don't know what would have happened had this plan not been implemented and we went to war against the bad guys back in the 60s.
Well, Steve follows up too, and he wants to hit you with a little Machiavelli. He says, "Bix, in your opinion, do the ends justify the means?"
Because we have to live through it now, I would say no. But you either had to live through it back then or you live through it now. And I have heard from some of the guys involved in the JFK, kind of the good guys who wanted to take down the guys who killed JFK originally, and they're reaping their revenge now, and they're still angry about it. Apparently, those who are still with us. So, ends and means, who knows? It is a problem that's been put off for decades, and now we're going to have to deal with it.
Okay, Bix, this one comes from JT, and JT is wondering, how does this whole thing end? Does it end with a happy global village or an independent sovereign batch of countries?
I see the United States going back to more state-focused government, like the Constitution says. The federal government will be bankrupt, and all those departments that Ron Paul talks about taken out will be taken out because we won't have the money to do it. The world, if there's one thing that will happen, the world will be very different without fiat money, and everything's going to be different, from the things we are allowed to make to the things we use as money, to the way we interact with our government and our neighborhoods. So it will be more organic, more towards state sovereignty, I believe. But, it's up to us. It's up to we the people to figure out how we want to go forward.
All right. Thanks, JT. Good question. This one comes from White Knight. He really wants to believe your theories, Bix, as I do. But he thinks it sounds too happy, not enough real life, too movie ending-ish, too happy, tied up with a bow of an ending. My question, he says, is this. It seems that a cashless society is what the powers that be want to push us toward. And if a cashless society happens, what would that do to precious metals?
I think, we have a cashless society right now, kind of, with all the electronic blips and the fiat money, and the problem with a cashless society. And I've watched the movies. What was the guy's name who did the Oz movie? Bill Still. I've watched the movie, and he gets everything right until the end, where he says, gold and silver should not be used as money. You cannot put human beings in charge of a monetary system, because history has shown they will abuse it. No matter good intent or not, it will be abused. That is why gold and silver are not perfect as money. Nobody ever claimed that, but they're the best things we got that don't involve people. And that's kind of where I see the future going. As far as the happy ending, people say my theory is too rosy. My theory involves every single person in the world losing all of their electronic and fiat wealth. That kind of is not so rosy, but it's the afterwards. The problem right now is that money is debt, and all forms of debt, all forms of money are debt. Derivatives, paper dollars, electronic blips, it's all debt created out of thin air. Anybody could create it if you got a printing press, or not even a printing press, a computer. The difference between $100 billion and $1 trillion is 1 0 on a computer. So the future does have the potential to be rosy. There's a lot of wealth in the world. The problem is it's in a handful of people control that wealth, and that's what is going to end.
Okay, Bix, the final question from our 6-chapter series on Ask Bix a Question. This one comes from Keith, and he's wondering that given this unprecedented response at SGT Report about this interview and these more than 140 questions, 140 different responses from people asking you questions, he wonders, do you ever worry that you might be leading many people into a false hope?
If I thought the road to root of theory was wrong, yes, I would worry that I'm leading people into a false hope. But I don't think it's wrong, and it is playing out before us, and there's so many things that have happened that are pointing more and more toward that's the correct theory, that there are good guys taking out the bad guys to return us to a sound form of money, and it is all happening now. You can see it all around you. It should pick up a lot between now and the election time, or at least the convention in August. So keep your eye open. There is potential for greatness, but it's going to come down to the people. It's going to come down to the people standing up and saying, enough is enough. We're going to go back to the Constitution, and we're going to try to live the way we were set up to live by our founding fathers.
Okay, guys, well, that sums it up. I hope that we answered everybody's questions. Certainly we tackled some of the toughest questions that I think Bix could possibly be asked. So if we didn't answer something important to you, comment below. We really appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you liking the video and sharing it with others. And Bix, most of all, we appreciate your time. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks, Sean, and good luck to everybody in the coming few months.
Yeah, go Ron Paul 2012.
That's right.
All right, talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that's it, guys. Much more to come. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.